Alrighty, well I've made videos talking about the different foods I've eaten before, but I want to make one primarily talking about the different tastes of different meat that we have in Australia that you're probably not going to experience in the United States. Now, before I get onto this, a few little facts about Australia. We are not quite the same as they may be in England, where they use a lot of offal in the mince and stuff like that. We really, there's one or two maybe, home brand Woolworths, Snowy River pies that have offal in them, and people avoid those two brands like the plague. And it's sort of like this. We have that many bloody sheep, we don't need to eat offal. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. We export sheep all over the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iraq, probably the United Arab Emirates too, heaps of places in Arabia we export sheep to. As for beef, we export to Japan. We're exporting even to Russia recently, but that was mainly offal, I think. And South Korea, it's worked out really good. We had a large chunk of their markets, and we had a little free trade agreement where we make the 5% tariff disappear on South Korean vehicles, and they make any of the obstructions and bullshit and tariffs with beef disappear. And all of a sudden, well, the US beef market ain't going too good in South Korea, and we've got about 80% of it, and in the next 2.5 years we're going to have about 95% control of the South Korean beef market. Yeah, as I said, Japan, they're very fussy, and I think we export beef to them, I'm pretty certain. I know that there's a lot of places in Asia we do. One of the biggest ones being Indonesia, which isn't very far to go. In fact, Japan for a long time has been interested in our beef ever since the 70s. And I think, Thailand, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's even Vietnam, and I think even China. I should pick up some of these cans and show them in the shops. I should just buy them and show them. But we actually, if we go into these Asian shops, they've got all the different bizarre things, the canned jackfruit and all these other weird Asian fruits canned, and then you go to the meat section and you see this stuff, canned Australian beef. And it's not just beef, it's listed as Australian beef printed on the tin, like painted onto the tin. And yeah, and a lot of that I think, it's probably Thailand and different places like that that we export to there as well. But anyway, some of you guys may not know what sheep tastes like and whatnot. Now, I'll get right into the nitty-gritties of it here. Beef to me is sort of like sheep with a particular weird mix of dehydrated green split peas and yellow split peas or something like that I once cooked up in my slow cooker and then let sit there for about 3 days. If I got that and mixed it with sheep, it pretty much tastes like beef. There's a bit of an extra aftertaste to beef. I have seen some Americans kind of tricked by lamb, thinking it's actually beef. And, well, I'll explain a few technicalities. You've got hoggets, which are very old sheep. Some people eat them. Good luck to them. I'm not touching hoggets. They taste like shit. There's mutton, which is an older sheep. A hogget may be flaming 7, 8 years old. You're too old. There's mutton, which is probably about 5 years old. Hogget is the name of a age of sheep. Mutton is a meat from a sheep that's around 5 years of age. I usually eat stuff that's about 2.5, maybe 3 years of age at the oldest. And as for lamb, that's usually about 8 or 9 months old. It's generally not even a year old. It's about 8 or 9 months old. When you think lamb, don't think tiny little tiddler. They're actually pretty big. They're a mix of either half Bord Leicester and half Merino, which Bord Leicester is like on the border between Scotland and England, like right up Manchester way sort of thing, somewhere there. That's where Bord Leicesters originate from. They're an English sheep. They're a barefaced sheep, which means they don't sort of have hair. The wool come right down over their forehead. The wool sort of stops at the back of the head. And that's sort of a meat breed. My uncle used to have a whole stack of them. They're bloody arseholes of things when it comes to destroying fences. And then there's Merinos, which are our wool breed. And 50-50 mix. Sometimes it's only a quarter Bord Leicester, 3/4 Merino, and that's generally what your fat lambs are. There are other ones such as Dorpers, which are like tanks with legs. They're just fully smoked. They're strong sheep. They're destructive things, and the wool falls off them on their own. But apparently they've got a whole new taste of their own. Apparently it's very strong and quite good, depending on your liking. But generally speaking, your hoggets will taste probably pretty rough. Your mutton is sort of rich and strong enough, but you wouldn't want it to be any older, because when it gets really old, it just tastes stringy and bland and just shit. And it just, as meat chopped up in front of you, most meat is all right. Hoggets chopped up in front of you, some of them it actually stinks a bit. It smells a bit. And sheep I eat, they're pretty good, but they're not old enough to class as mutton. But they're younger than lambs. And lamb is pretty much like mutton, just a bit softer a taste. Yeah, as for kangaroo, it's like lamb with a whole shitload of blooming vinegar poured into the frying pan. That's pretty much what it's like. Those of you who have ever wondered about crocodile, it's brilliant. I wouldn't be too surprised if it was pretty similar to alligator. It's sort of a mix between lobster and turkey. And yeah, alligators, crocodile's quite good stuff. But not available everywhere. It's actually quite hard to get. While I'm thinking of it, I meant to mention this before, the sheep. Kidneys. Oh, I had sheep kidney once, and I cut it up into tiny little slices and went to fry it, and it tasted like piss. And that was the last time I touched kidneys. But kidney is common enough and out there that you could probably just buy a pie and you'll taste it yourself. Lungs, never had them. Liver, I've had it quite a lot. My father is great at cooking it. You got to cook it very slow. He makes up some sort of a, it's weird, it's like a flippin' dough mix. It's almost like you go to start frying it, but you don't sort of fry it in oil. You throw in a bunch of flour and like too much water to make a pancake, and you don't mix it really quickly, but it's very sloppy as it goes in, and then as it sort of starts to fry, it sort of thickens up, and he has pieces of sliced liver in that, and it's sort of like a giant flour dough mix gravy, and I think wholemeal's the one he uses to do it, and I'm not too sure, but I think it might be wholemeal. And you basically cook it very slowly, and if you cook it for quite a while, it comes out reasonably tough, but it tastes quite quite alright. And if you don't cook it enough, you will be throwing up. Heart. People really wonder what heart tastes like. I can attest I have eaten quite a lot of sheep heart. You got two chambers, one's bigger, one's smaller. Those of you who are heart experts probably know what's what. Few things to realise when you eat a heart. Don't just sink your damn teeth straight into it. You probably want to slice it up. I have come across sheep with cholesterol build-up inside the heart. That's right, it's like this crunchy, white, calcium-y shit. It is your worst nightmare when eating heart if you go and sink your teeth into that ghastly shit, plastery crap. Another thing is, because you may not have actually washed the blood out of the heart, or whoever done the killing mightn't have washed the blood out of the heart, or the butchering, you may find you cook it up and there's, well, effectively there's blood sausage in it, like black pudding. It's basically like a giant heap of dried blood that's been boiled, and yeah, that sort of cakes up in there. Sometimes you find blood clots. It's one of these things where you probably want to slice it up after you cooked it, and maybe even before you cooked it. If you are going to slice it up before you cook it, I've got a few recommendations. You're going to have a lot of fat come to the surface. If you cook a heart as is, there is fat on that heart that is exceedingly thick. I mean, real heavy fat. I'm not saying it's thick as in there's a lot of it, but just the consistency of fat on the heart is nowhere near, like it's about 2.5 times as thick as the consistency of fat on their leg or something like that. You are better to cook it as is without slicing it up, because if you slice it up, that will all end up in the pot. If you don't slice it up, that fat will actually stay stuck to the heart and not end up in the water. Primarily not end up in the water. The other funny thing is, with your heart, it goes back to all your arteries and all that crap at the top. Right around the upper edge, that's where there's a big heavy ring of fat as well. And quite honestly, those artery bits are all chewy and a bit weird, and you might just want to, once you've cooked it, slice the top off to get rid of any of the artery connections and basically the whole top. Give that to your cat. Slice the rest up in slices, like your heart's like a upside down pear. Slice it, from top to bottom basically, and make sure you've got no cholesterol or muck in there. To avoid the blood clot ups, as I was saying about, you might want to actually defrost it and basically give it a blast out with a tap on the kitchen sink. And I sometimes stick my fingers in and wiggle it around. But if you don't want to do that, and you slice it up after you cook it, you'll notice that sometimes there will be dried blood in there, and you can just flick that out with the end of your knife or whatever. No big deal. But I reckon it's actually superior meat because it is, taste-wise, it is a lot richer and really strong comparative to any of the other sheep meat you're going to have. Even comparative to beef, it's really strong. And if you like a very rich, strong sort of a meat, I really recommend eating sheep's heart. You may only get lamb's hearts. Lamb's hearts, I've seen them in the supermarket. They're not quite the same size as the hearts I've eaten, but don't do it to be a superhero because that's just crazy. But believe me, the meat in it, I reckon, is really strong, really rich, and actually quite good. One day I might try lungs. My mum has eaten the brains. Not going to go into the story of how she got the brains out because it's just disgusting. But yeah, they're apparently milky tasting. whatever that means. But anyway, I can't really give you an idea of what that's like straight up. I've eaten a lot of chicken hearts. They're good. They're quite good. Sort of chickeny flavour, but a bit more red meatish flavour. Rabbit. Good old rabbit. I'll tell you what. I've seen my cats go for rabbit over friggin' chicken. I've actually seen that a few times. Oh, and surprise, surprise, as I'm making this video, this morning, first time they've done it, they've upgraded from baby rabbits to adult rabbits. Fantastic. Now we're really going to have a stranglehold on the rabbit population. Black Kitty had one there, and it was only just leg bones left and a bunch of fluff and skin, and it was definitely an adult rabbit. It was pretty flaming big. But anyway, rabbit is sort of like chicken with a touch of, just a hint of lamb flavour, or you could almost say a hint of beef flavour, like a weak touch of beef flavour in with the chicken flavour. As for gelatine, if you boil rabbit and you whack it on a plate and then put that plate in the fridge, holy smoke, you will have some very stiff jelly indeed on that plate the next day. And the more of that, the longer you let it boil down, and the more of that boiling water that the rabbit boiled in that you pour into a bowl, say, and put it in the fridge, you just have a big heap of jelly. They are surprisingly, I know that you get a bit of, if you boil chicken, you get a bit of gelatine. With rabbit, you get even more gelatine than chicken, and the gelatine you do get seems to be a bit firmer. It could be just because I boiled it too long. But never turn your back on the old rabbit in times of need, because I tell you what, I have got no issues with eating rabbits. And yeah. I have made a video before, and I should make another one. I might make it in another 5 minutes, about roadkill and how to prepare and check roadkill, so that you know you're getting something that's actually not going to give you food poisoning. But anyway, that'll be for another video.